Afternoon. I'm Deborah Price, founder and CEO of the Money Coaching Institute, and this is Conversations About Money. Today, I have an awesome guest, Melanie Larson, who is a combination of things to me. First of all, Melanie is a very dear friend, but we have quite a history. But rather than me tell you that story, I think I'd really like Melanie to share about first of all, her own journey and the history of our connection because it's very relevant to our work. And there's a very special aspect of the work that Melanie does that virtually I don't know anyone else who does. So, Melanie Larson, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Tell us about your journey and your story, how you ended up where you are today. And I know it's been many years since we first met, so please just share with us.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for having me today. It's such an honor to be on your show because you've had such an incredible impact on the person that I am today, and also just in general, my career path. I found Deborah through a crisis back probably close to 20 years ago. I base everything on when my children were born, and my son had just been born, and I was very frustrated with my financial situation and felt a lot of anxiety and fear around money. And I was like, I just need a money therapist. And I literally went online, and I was at work at Kaiser Permanente, and I Googled money therapist, and Deborah popped up. And what do you know? She lived in Petaluma, where I also lived. And that night she dropped off her book, Money Magic, on my doorstep. And that was what started our work together. And not only did Deborah change my relationship with money um, and how I perceive myself and my own at the time my challenges around that, but it was such interesting work that I decided I wanted to know more and wanted to dive deeper. So I did the coaching program with Deborah. And as I thought perhaps I would move into doing money coaching on the side. By trade, am a dietitian and was working at Kaiser Permanente at the time. Ended up having three kids, went through a divorce, and that never really came to fruition. However, it did so much to empower me and to um, highlight where my own behaviors are consistently challenged, and not only just in money, but in other areas of my life. Having had done a ton of work on behavior change theory in my master's program, I started to see as Deborah said, the mirroring, the relationship between food and money with my clients and patients and friends and people in my life. It was sort of crazy. I've always been in the arena of eating disorders, disordered eating patterns. It's all about behavior, and found that there is a strong correlation between money coaching and nutrition counseling, in the sense that we're both looking at behaviors and choices that either send us into fight or flight or help to ground us so that we can live and serve and walk in purpose. After I left Kaiser Permanente a few years ago, I went to work for a really amazing eating disorder treatment center where I was immersed in eating disorders for a couple of years. And then it became even more profoundly, I became more profoundly aware of the crossover and just not only looking at patterns of food insecurity versus um, food in excess. And
Mhm.
so, unfortunately, I'm no longer with that company, but fortunately, I have started my own private practice. And I am really into behavioral nutrition therapy. And am working with clients now on how their choices, their memories, their emotions, their behaviors, very similarly to the work that Deborah does, how it has impacted their lives, their choices, their health, and how to find that magician in the eating, just like in the money.
Right. Well, I always thought it was so fascinating. I remember, when you called me and you said, "Oh my God, these dynamics are like almost identical. The way people are around food and the way people are around money, and archetypally, um, while the, you know, while they're very different in terms of the the content, the actual behaviors really are tremendously similar. And I had a suspicion about that all along. And when I've been teaching, I've always said, there's some research out there that indicates that there appears to be a crosswire in the brain between the need and desire for food and the need and desire for money. And the way that, I don't know if you remember this or not from training, but the way that they discovered that was they did a research project on people who had had bariatric surgery. And so when they had their stomach stapled and they could not consume enough or as much food as they once did, they started to track and notice that the next behavioral issue that arose was money.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, years later, I was contacted by somebody in the treatment world who said, "Look, we get people sober, but next we start noticing they start shopping like crazy." So there is definitely something around food and money, very similar dynamics, and also addiction in general. And I guess we could say food dynamics can also be addictive. So there we have it, right?
Yep.
So when you look at all this and now that you have your own business and you've developed your own protocol for this, um, I'm just curious, have you started talking with your clients about their relationship with money in addition to the work you're doing with them around their own eating behaviors?
Absolutely. And I love that you just asked that question because what I usually start with is, you've got Maslow's hierarchy, and what is it? It's shelter, food, and love, or the three things. But
Well, baseline security issues um, need to be established first, and then you continue to go up to the highest level is self-actualization.
okay, but there's nothing in there about money. And that's what I feel like is the missing link, because
Mhm.
when money is a challenge, or there's, scarcity mentality, then all those other things are going to be challenged in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And I've
And
said that, that I believe that if Maslow was alive today, because the research is different than when he first developed the hierarchy of needs, he'd probably recognize money needs to be on the baseline. If you
yes,
don't have
yes,
the money stuff worked out, it will upstream affect everything else.
yeah. And
And
that's what I start with my patients and clients. But I also, as you have supported me around creating a protocol, I also do what is called a food biography,
Mhm.
similarly to what you do with your money um, biography. And the correlation between financial stress and eating patterns throughout one's lifespan is it just every person there is a correlation. and
It's
uh,
fascinating.
and they don't what's even more fascinating is when they discover that that's where their challenge is.
Right.
And it goes all the way back to a client whose parents got divorced when she was 7, and mom became the sole provider of food, and um, food issues for her, sneaking food,
Mhm.
um, and overeating and stressful when she felt stress became
Oh,
a
yeah.
pattern for her that she's still dealing with today in her 50s. And
Mm.
we were able to pinpoint every time, every period in her life where there was a financial struggle, and her weight would go up. And then when things were calm, it would go down. And it's that sort of that whole whack-a-mole that you were talking about. You take care of the food issue, and um, then the finance starts to rear its head, and you get the finances, under control, and then the food stuff comes back. So
That's
it's
right.
very interesting.
Yeah, I just started training another um, coach who's actually a dietitian, has a similar background to you, who's also integrating money coaching because she saw the correlation too. So
Mhm.
I would very much like to connect you with her. She's in Austin, Texas.
Great.
She just started her training now. But I think also I'd be curious, because when I've had clients, and I've had many clients with both food and money issues, and of course I don't address the food dynamics, I would um, send them to someone like you, of course. But what I also noticed is how much feelings of shame and core self-esteem itself seems to also have some very distinct overlapping factors where it relates to the tendency for someone to develop both food and money issues. What's been
Mhm.
your experience around that?
Well, I feel like let me start with a study that I recently was introduced to,
Sure,
or I went
I'd
to a
love to.
conference a few weeks ago, and it was talking about the correlation between food insecurity early in life
Hmm.
and the development of eating disorders later in life. And it
Hmm.
mostly comes out as binge eating disorder or bulimia. Those are the two that tend to be the most common. And I think you've shared with me that you've also seen a lot of binge eating in
Oh, yeah.
some of your clients. Um, the theory is that because of the food insecurity and the self-esteem challenges
Mhm.
that were caused because of not having enough just for basic needs, um,
Right.
it travels on up their lifespan, and there's this tendency to want, when there is food present and they're
Hmm.
capable of getting food at their fingertips
Hmm.
whenever they want it, they're not in a scarcity mentality or situation. They just want to eat and eat and
Right.
eat. They're really,
So
it's hoarding. It's they're
it's a
worried they're not going to
compensation
get enough.
system. Yeah.
And not getting enough is a very, as you well know, a reflection of not feeling like you are enough.
Right.
So it's whatever you have easy access to is
Hmm.
where the addictive pattern is going to show up.
Yeah. And so, because I don't know anything about the neurodynamics of food, but in money, when you have the equivalent of somebody who would be a binge eater would be somebody who overspends consistently, right? And
Mhm.
that person is almost always getting a dopamine hit, and they may be even having a dopamine hijack if it's a true, sort of more of an addictive shopping pattern, right?
Mhm.
So, in your work, do you often find that there may be dopamine driven behaviors as it relates to the food and overeating? Is that, or is there
Oh,
another sort of
absolutely.
scientific or chemical dynamic involved in that in terms of the neurobiology of that?
I think there's two, I see two different dynamics. One is the neurobiology. Um, well, I guess they're both similar in neurobiology, but I see the addictive pattern and I
Mhm.
also see habitual. You can get
Yeah,
into a habit
right.
that the addictive personality has a difficult time stopping. The
Hmm.
person who's developed a habit can unwind that when they have the right tools or skills to do that.
More easily, certainly.
Exactly. So, um, but yes, I have often seen when someone is working with me or working with our team whenever I was in the eating disorder treatment world, um, we would get their eating habits and their brain on track with not only proper nutrients, but the proper
Hmm.
behaviors,
Hmm.
thoughts, therapy, etc. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, where can I get my fix? And
Yeah.
it's
It
wherever
needs to
they,
move someplace else, right?
yeah, yeah. And
Which is
so
dopamine
I
driven
hope that
entirely.
that answers your question, but that's one of the most common things
Yeah.
that I see, and I see it in um, also ADHD. I'm working more directly with ADHD clients now, and we are working constantly on like bringing down the central nervous system, calming the central nervous system, and trying to restrain from the impulsivity of wanting to reach for food whenever they're in need of that dopamine hit, because that's like
Hmm.
it's all about the dopamine. And I've found also that taking things very slowly with these people is a really great way to see success in, because they're typically impulsive and we just really want to
Yeah.
slow everything down. And on the flip side of that, there's the people with ADHD that don't eat. They don't eat
Well,
because they
and as
it's
you
not
know, that's one of
important.
my problems is I just forget to eat.
It's
So
not important to them. Um, and that's also pretty scary because when you're starving the brain, in
yeah.
addition to its own neurobiology, it's sort of like a double whammy.
And I'd just like to say for anybody who is listening, if you have been diagnosed with ADHD, ADD, either, and you notice that you have tendencies around food and or money, it's really important to really stop and take a look at them because I'm somebody who I have ADHD. I have said my whole life, I'm so glad I've never had an eating issue, right? I'm not food focused. I've never been food focused. I've never, like everybody, I put a few pounds on, lose a few pounds or whatever, but what Melanie really helped me to see is I actually do have a type of eating disorder which is related to ADHD, and that is I forget to eat. And that has really created some health challenges for me because you can't forget to eat. There's a reason why we eat. It's because your brain and your body needs the fuel. But I've tended to be so passionate about my work or whatever. And so I'm working all day and I'm like, oh, going along. And then I'll just crash, usually at about 3 or 4 o'clock. And I'll go, I don't know why I feel so bad. And then I went, oh, crap, I forgot to eat today. And that's something that somebody with ADHD really needs to understand because if it weren't for Melanie, I would have never made those two connections, right? So you don't have to have a traditional typical eating disorder to have a challenge when it comes to food that is also probably really worth your while to explore. In my case, critical at this stage for my own physical and certainly even neurological well-being. So I really appreciate that you helped me to make that connection, Melanie.
Well,
Really
yeah, and
appreciate
I want to somewhat destigmatize eating
it.
disorder.
Mhm.
We all have disordered eating in some way, shape, or form.
That's
And
time too.
that's what I'm passionate about helping people discover. And I think about my son. I have a son who's 14, and um, as I've been doing all of this research and studying around ADHD, I am just so much more hyper aware of his tendencies and his eating and his spending. He
Mm,
goes into a frenzy when he eats. It's just like he can't get enough. He just loves it.
yeah.
And the same thing, we go to the mall like twice a year.
That's all you can handle.
It's but it's real. It's very real. And
Yeah.
those are his two things where I see
Mm,
it go off the rails. So
yeah. It's really fascinating. Let's talk about something that I've really observed a lot and I talk about with my clients around money. And I know there's got to be a relationship with food too. And that is, when I'm working with clients and maybe they've had a history of um, feeling like they haven't done well with money. Maybe they've had debt issues. And so there's levels of shame and they're trying to get out from underneath of it. But between the feelings they have of shame and, you know, the other dynamics that we discover as a result of the money coaching process, we'll often find that early on there was some deprivation dynamic. So
Mhm.
deprivation could be not enough love, not enough comfort, not enough food, not enough money, any of the not enough of,
Mhm.
and it immediately almost always creates a pattern that becomes hardwired where deprivation itself is a real trigger that then stimulates the behavior. So
Yep.
whether it's food or shopping and spending or whatever, and my, what I've always said to coaches when I'm training, I said, listen, if you're talking to your clients about like, let's try to repair and get you back on track and maybe, work on starting to reduce your debt or whatever the case may be, which is not part of our core process, but it's beyond the core process and, ongoing coaching and support does involve more of the practical side. And what I've noticed is this tendency for people to, go, well, you got to get rid of all that debt first. And I go, no, that's not what we're going to do. The minute you tell clients that they can't spend any money and they can't have any fun or any joy, you set a trap for deprivation dynamics to come
Mhm.
into play. And I said, I want you to know that this is just like dieting. The minute somebody feels deprived, they can only tolerate that for so long. Everyone I know who's ever dieted, they usually fall off the wagon. And I think deprivation is the trigger. I'm just curious what you think about that, because this is just my own theory and I don't know anything about
Oh
your
no,
that way.
I absolutely agree with you.
Mm,
And the way that I have my practice set up now does not involve a specific caloric diet plan. It's
hmm
100% about identifying behaviors and why we choose to do things the way
hmm
that we do. And I agree with you. And it brings a analogy to mind that I've used a lot of times. I think it's from the book. Can't remember the author, but the book is called Switch.
mm
And it's a book about behavior change. And in the book, and you can Google this, it's really cool. There's always pictures. There's an elephant and there's a rider. And if you imagine this big elephant and this tiny little person on top of the elephant with the reins, and they're on a narrow path. And
hmm
basically, the elephant represents the food or the money, and the
hmm
rider is just trying to, keep the elephant on the path. And the elephant sees peanuts or the elephant sees water. And there's all this like steering and keeping them on track. And essentially, the rider gets tired.
mm
And
Yeah,
so the trying to do all the things to stay on a diet or stay on a budget is we don't have the bandwidth to
yeah,
control things that um,
yeah.
specifically. So I feel like that was sort of
It's a
a
great analogy. It really is, because I think the idea is that change really is best done as a slow
yes,
process rather
yes,
than
yes.
make somebody feel like, oh, I've got to lose all this weight in 30 days, or
Mhm,
I need to get rid of all my debt in,
mhm,
whatever period of time. It's like, let's just do this very strategically, slow, steady. You can have this food, and these are about choices,
mhm.
right? It's really all about choices, but then not triggering the mechanism that will kick in that deprivation dynamic, which then all bets are off whether they're going to be able to continue or not. Because
Yep.
I think once that gets triggered, that the person tends to just also take a lot of shame because they know they've done it yet
Mhm.
again, and they feel terrible that they have done it again.
And they use money or food to to
Yeah,
temporarily feel better, and
that's
it
right.
just restarts the whole dynamic.
So in your process, it sounds like you do this, really great inventory process first and identify, maybe just sort of walk me through the bones of it. You don't need to give the details, but if you could just describe it, I'm just curious about it because I haven't done it yet, although I'm going to.
Well, I each individual every person that comes through is different, as you know. Same. It's like I I have a set of processes that I use, and I
Mhm.
tailor it to the need of the person,
Mhm.
um, based on what they're really struggling with. Some of them come in here and they are following a beautiful anti-inflammatory diet,
Mhm.
but they just don't feel good, or they're having a hard time with their kids, or they're having like different types of competing. So we sort of tease out what exactly is going on. Baseline, I always want to make sure everybody's set up with a really foundational anti-inflammatory diet. And it's more about, these are the foods that have the most anti-inflammatory process. Make 80% of your diet these foods. And then you've got a little bit of playroom for going out to dinner, weekends, or whatever. And mind you, this is very simplistic in this
Right.
explanation. But I do a lot of work around their value systems,
Mhm.
their self-concept, the food biography, and then just really looking at food dynamics from childhood all the way through, where they currently are, their relationships, and how food has played a role in their life up until this point. And um, from that point, we decide, what do you want to work on?
Mhm.
And the I love that you said taking things really slow. And this
Mhm.
is where a lot of people, I feel, either love or hate this work. They love
Mhm.
it no matter what, but it's not, usually they're used to going to somebody that gives them 10 things to do and thank you, out the door, and you're done. This is a very slow process. For example, yesterday I had a midlife client come in. I'm also trained in menopause coaching now. And so, but coupled with ADHD, which is very real because a lot of times the menopause transition triggers ADHD.
Yeah.
And she just all kinds of different behaviors she needed to work on. And we literally she left here yesterday with a goal of meditating for 10 minutes a day.
Mhm.
And for her, that didn't feel like enough. Like,
Mhm.
that's all you're going to ask me to do? Yeah, because we're going to start by decompressing the central nervous system so that we
Mhm.
can even think beyond
Right.
what's like what we think we need.
Right.
So
So you're establishing a new foundation first,
absolutely.
so
Hmm.
that you're setting them up for success by
Yes.
creating that, because it doesn't exist right now, and that's part of the reason and that's also true with money coaching. If you don't reestablish it and sort of go to ground zero again, all the other
Yeah.
stuff's just going to keep coming back. So I get
And
it.
I'm not going to add another behavior until that one is fully mastered. And we're just going to keep looking at uh, what works well and what
Hmm.
other support she needs around that until she's done it for a good 3 or 4 weeks. And mind you, she's still going to come see me, and we're going to sort through all these other modalities that I was sharing that I use. But right now, the behavior has to be established because she's never been successful at maintaining a behavior change.
Hmm. Okay. So you're still working in the meantime on understanding and helping them with the specific food
Yes,
dynamic.
yes.
They're not,
So we're
so
doing the
they're not
food
just going home and
biography.
meditating without thinking about the food and
Oh, no,
integrating
no,
the
no.
food pieces.
We're
Okay.
working on the
Make sure
biography.
that people didn't misunderstand.
No, thank you. We're still working on the biography, the patterns, because she doesn't know that her patterns have an impact on how she feels
Right.
and
Right.
um, where she's at in this moment. And that's what I'm establishing. In the meantime, she doesn't have to go change her life.
Right.
She's got a tiny little thing to work on so that she can focus on reestablishing that foundation.
Well, you're welcome to use my motto, which is if you can't name it, you can't change it. So, I mean, ultimately, that's what it is. You're helping them to name what's going on,
Mhm.
identifying what those patterns are, which is exactly what we do in money coaching. And then once they name it, they have some power and
Yep,
they can begin to, with guidance and support, learn how to control it and change it over time.
yep,
So that if we expected people to be able to take all that in and just change it all quickly, just the documented research on the change process just does not support that in any way. So
No, but our society supports
got to do it fast.
quick fix and instant gratification. And if we don't get that like instant result, we don't feel like we're doing it right.
Yeah.
And I'm slowing down the clock.
Yep. I really understand. It sounds wonderful. I'm really looking forward to going through the process myself and, you know, making some of the changes that I need to make. Um, what would you say in terms of, the is there I would imagine that more of your clients are women than men, mostly just because women tend to be more obsessed with food and
Mhm.
weight in general, but I know men have their dynamics. But have you noticed, or do you work with men as well? Because I think they also need support, but don't always feel maybe as safe going in to do that. What's your experience been with that?
Well, I love that you're asking me all these perfect segue questions. I
Hmm.
love I love working with anyone. My work has been mostly with women because of the nature of, like you said, most women will come for support around their body image or their disordered eating, menopause. But what I'm starting to see is that it needs to be recognized that men, this midlife crisis time of period of life is real for men too. And um, what I'm seeing is that coinciding with the trend around Ozempic and
Yeah.
the GLP-1s and the semaglutide type drugs, I'm seeing men. So with men, I'm noticing that they're going through this sort of midlife uh, time period, like women, and a lot of them are also making changes for their health and wanting to lose weight, and they're using the GLP-1s as a resource for that, and it's it's giving them a lot of instant results. But I see that when they're not eating, they're starting to gravitate towards money or gambling or alcohol, and they need more support coming off of the drugs. So I've
Yeah.
been really trying to um, look at my niche in that arena and how can I support men with, because men don't have the same type of behavior change. Um, I don't know if it's not a weakness or struggle. They're different. They approach things very differently than women. I
Hmm.
feel like the women are a little bit have more of an emotional attachment. And if men have the same, it's harder to get at or
Mm.
to for them to surrender or acknowledge.
Right.
So I find them to be very challenging, and I love a good puzzle. But I do think there's an incredible niche for this work with
Yeah.
men, and I love working with men.
Well, and it does strike me that that's, again, another interesting, overlap here is that often more women get help with money than men do. And so just want to say to all you guys out there, if you're listening, you deserve help and support too. And it's okay if you don't know about money, or it's okay if you've had food dynamics that, haven't served you. We all deserve help and support. So just know that. And so relative to what's next, and I just would like to say that Melanie and I are developing a training program that we're actually going to be offering through the Money Coaching Institute to help train other coaches how to work with their clients who also have eating disorder or eating challenges and behaviors around food and money, because we think this is a really big area and that we can be of service. Now, bear in mind, these coaches will be coaching them around, the intersection of those and helping to identify and name them with the client. They won't be acting as a dietitian or giving them nutritional the kind of work that you really do need to be licensed for. And so, referrals will go out to Melanie or, whomever they might even know in their own communities, but certainly Melanie would be able to assist. So for those of you who might be interested in having a little bit of a specialty area with food and money, just know that we'll be, announcing that sometime probably in the next month or two. So tell me about just your perception in terms of this idea that if more people were coaches who are already we're in the trenches every day, we're working with people around behavior change all day long. Um,
Mhm.
how do you envision uh, that in terms of as a practice that somebody could take on without having to have the deeper knowledge around nutrition that you have? Do you have, you may not be there yet because I know that it's still in development, but any ideas or thoughts about that? I'd just be curious about.
Well, I think that the fundamental underlying behavior change current
Mhm,
that is within both is really what's necessary in order to identify. And what we're
mhm,
doing is we're trying to bring awareness to behaviors. And although these coaches will not have a degree in nutrition, we're identifying a pattern, a
mhm.
behavior, and they're all the process, the behavior change process is pretty similar across the board.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
coaches, that's what coaches are basic, a lot of coaches, regardless of whether it's a health coach or a money coach, the behavior change process is a fundamental aspect of the training. And I think that it's, as long as we can help identify, I think it's going to be amazing because
Mhm.
people are going to have these aha moments of, oh my gosh, I've struggled with this my whole life, and this is why.
Or
And
like me, not even thinking you have an issue, and then you
right,
discover that these two issues are, you know, actually
yeah.
kind of related.
So I think that it's really important to have a more collaborative or expansive approach
Mhm.
to looking at what's going on in people's lives according to their behaviors, and are their behaviors in alignment with their value system. That's really what it boils down to. And whether it's food or money or shopping or gambling or whatever, it's all part of the coping mechanism that in some way, shape, or form has brought comfort until it doesn't. So,
You know what I had this thought just this morning is that while I am absolutely an advocate of the 12-step programs, and I have personally sent many people because I also run into seeing people who have addictions, through money coaching. It's interesting. We find out almost everything and then just offer the support and resources, right, for the areas that are
mhm,
not in our wheelhouse specifically.
mhm.
Um, but the one part of the 12-step program that I don't like has been DA. And I also don't know that I'm a great fan of OA or, yeah, overeaters. It's not
Overeaters, and when you said DA, are you talking which
Debtors Anonymous.
debtors? Okay, well, there's also a Food Addicts Anonymous that's FA,
Then that's
and
the,
I do not. I don't want to minimize the work that they've done in any way,
no, I
shape, or
agree.
form.
I think it's an excellent program. There are just
But
certain aspects that I don't see working for
it
people.
it creates another level of dependency on something
Hmm.
that isn't identifying the root. So that's my um,
Well, the other thing is you can't abstain. If you have a drug problem or an alcohol problem, or even if you're a gambler, you can abstain from those things. You can't abstain from food or money.
mm-mm,
And that's why I think, especially, not having any experience with OA, Overeaters Anonymous, um, I have a lot of experience with clients who've done DA, and
mhm.
the solution is just don't use credit, and that's actually not solving a problem,
Right.
right? And we live in a world where not using it can be challenging. So I think people need to learn to understand how they got to where they were or are. And then once they have that level of awareness, know that if they change the behaviors and they have understanding and awareness about those things, they can learn to use credit and or have debt in
Hmm.
ways that serve them, because there are things that probably you should consider financing, right? Um, and I say this all the time to even my coaches that I'm working with. They'll say, "Oh, well, I hate debt." And I go, "It's okay to hate debt, but you need to recognize not all debt is bad."
Right.
Just like we need to recognize not all food and eating is bad. It's really about becoming clear about what's working and what's not working, and being committed to some sort of change process so that you can get where you're going and you can feel better about either one of those parts of your lived experience, right?
Absolutely. And to circle back around, the 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 OA and FA require a diet plan. And I'm talking a diet plan. It has to be
Mm,
followed. And that
mm,
goes back to creating that dynamic of restriction
deprivation.
and
Yeah,
deprivation. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I would love to become the second, if you, instead of DA or OA, if that didn't work for you, come and see us, because
Mm,
I think we can address it at the root
yep.
cause and then really create a larger, more sustainable kind of change for people in both of those areas of their lives. So
Yep.
I'm really excited about bringing that forward with you.
Yep. Me too, Deborah.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey having known you for 20 years, and I just want to say I'm just so proud of you and
Mm.
so excited that you got this opportunity to start your own business. As you know, I have been hoping one day you would do that, because I know how brilliant you are and also how passionate and compassionate you are with others. So thank you for the good work you're doing.
Well, thank you for your mentorship. Friendship first, but mentorship
Mhm.
um, all these years. There's many Deborah inspired parts of myself, both professionally and
Mhm.
personally. So thank you.
Very sweet. Thank you, sweetie, for saying
Mhm.
that. As always, my pleasure. Okay, well, everyone, I'd just like to let Melanie share a little bit also. How can people reach out to you? Website information, et cetera, so they know how to reach out.
Well, I have a website. It's motivatewithmel.com. And I do a complimentary, what I call a momentum builder call, where we can talk about what's going on and what direction we might want to try to work together with.
Beautiful. All right. Well, go get motivated with Mel. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time. And everybody, have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you next week on Conversations About Money.
Bye. Thank you.